Good morning. Hello, everybody. My name is Erica Austin. I'm here with Dogwise, and I am joined today by Jessica Pierce, who is the author of the new book, Who's a Good Dog and How to Be a Better Human. We are really excited to discuss this book today. So, welcome, Jessica. Thank you so much for joining us.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
I
So, I have
am
a
honored.
question. I have a question to get us started. This book cover is gorgeous. I love this book. It is so beautiful. I love this dog on the book, this image that you chose. Is this your dog? Is this Bella?
It's not, but it just happens to look a lot like Bella. And you might have a picture of Bella somewhere in your email that you could show.
Yeah, let's
Um,
see if we can get that up.
Bella is similar, tricolored, and similarly eager about treats, although I have to say Bella is far less good at catching them than the dog on the cover.
We
But
all
no, it
have
was
to
a
say
surprise. I saw it and I'm like, oh my God, how did they know?
that is amazing. To get us started, I want to welcome everybody who's watching on Facebook and YouTube. If you're tuning in live, we encourage you to let us know where you're tuning in from. Leave us a comment, and we'll go ahead and share that and welcome you all. And if you have questions for Jessica as we're talking, we want to hear them. So just drop a comment in and we'll share that. We've got someone who's joining on YouTube saying, excited to hear. I've purchased the book, but haven't had a chance to read it yet. Cannot wait. Let me tell you, this book is just phenomenal. It was such an enjoyable read for me. I really loved that it felt like a discussion, and I'm so happy that I get to actually discuss it with you in real time, live on the internet, because I just really enjoyed reading it. I found so many things that I wanted to highlight, or I wanted to say, yeah, I wish that more people talked about that. So can you tell us a little bit about how this book came to be, where the idea came from?
Yeah, um I've been writing about dogs for uh, 15 years at least, and I've been living with dogs since before I was born. I have to say I'm actually named after my parents' dog Jessie. So
Oh
I
my goodness.
and it's funny, we've had a family event and we were looking through old pictures of a lot of pictures of me when I was a child, and every single picture I'm holding a dog. It's really interesting to me to see that this was part of my life even back then, long before I had the idea that I would actually write about dogs. The book came, I mean, it's really a kind of a culmination of everything that I've been thinking about and doing for the last 15 years, but also just a result of my living with dogs for this many years and the feeling, as an ethicist, I obsess about constantly about, am I doing this right? Am I doing things as well as I can? Am I giving Bella the kind of life that she deserves? And it's really complicated. And I think, I've been thinking about this for 15 years and I still don't know. And I really just wanted to focus down in on the that individual relationship between a person and their dog person, um, and talk about what it was like for me to struggle with things, and especially I will say that the book is partly a response to living with this companion Bella, who by kind of cultural social standards does not fit the definition of what a good dog is.
Yeah.
She's very opinionated. She doesn't like to, she likes to do training because she gets treats, but that's the only reason. She doesn't like to do it because she wants to do what I want her to do.
Sure.
And she's nervous around people, so she doesn't like to be touched. She's got boundary issues, and so a lot of people would look at her and have even said this to me. Oh, she's a mean dog. She's a bad dog.
Mm.
She's not socialized, and really making me feel bad about her, like I failed, which I'm sure I have in a million ways, but also I have done my very best. And that there was something wrong with her. And I know for a fact that she is a good dog. Every dog I've met, and she's beautiful, isn't she?
She is
She's
beautiful.
about
I was
12
able to
now.
grab that picture that you sent me, and she is just
Yeah.
gorgeous. And that tricolor, we just love, don't we just love dogs with little eyebrows? It makes them so expressive. The
Such an
anthropomorphic.
expressive face.
My gosh, she is a beautiful dog. And I love what you're saying, that people might label your dog as a bad dog, and that does maybe have some feelings of shame or guilt of where am I failing, and to really have the opportunity to explore that relationship like you did from your very unique perspective of being a bioethicist is so invaluable and really comes across in this book. We've got our comments coming in and people agreeing that Bella is in fact gorgeous.
Yeah, she is. She's
She
such a
is.
sweetheart. And it's nice to know that once people really get to know Bella, they see her true soul. And I guess that's what I want for every dog, is for us to
Absolutely.
be able to see who they really are and to love them and respect them for who they are, not who we want them to be, or not who, books on the library shelf tell us they ought to be.
Yes, absolutely.
Because dogs are their own selves and they don't always match our expectations or the expectations of other people. So,
Can you talk a little bit about being a bioethicist? You touched on it a little bit, but that we have a lot of authors who are dog trainers or dog handlers, or sometimes even just dog enthusiasts, people who have, grown up around dogs and have a real passion for dogs. But you're the first bioethicist I've ever talked to. So can you tell me a little bit about what that's about and kind of the
sure.
lens that you approach dogs and dog ownership and dogs of the world, kind of where you're coming from?
Yeah. So my professional degree, my PhD it's actually in religious studies, but I
Wow.
studied ethics and moral philosophy and bioethics. It is often and more commonly known as medical ethics. That's kind of a term that people recognize, but it's kind of narrow. And I did, in fact, earlier in my career, work at a medical school and teach medical students and think about ethical issues in healthcare. But I've always really been interested in animals and the environment and
Mm,
sort of trying to think about human animal relationships. So, but an ethicist, a bioethicist is somebody who is trained in the humanities, but is really working at the intersection of science and the humanities. So I have a lot of background in science too. I've spent a lot of time reading books in ethology and biology and animal behavior and zoology, and just trying to understand, trying to bridge the worlds, and help people think more clearly, ethically, by understanding the science. And I think in the case of dogs and other animals, the more you understand about the biology and physiology and emotional experiences of the animals themselves, and not just what we're projecting onto them, the better your ethical choices and kind of thought process can be, because you're making decisions based on what they need rather than what you think they might need based on whatever, those sort of cultural narratives or stereotypes or beliefs that you've had since you were 5 because your mom told you that, or whatever it is. So, really trying to be grounded in science, but also not letting that be the only voice in the room. And I'm not sure if everybody can hear me. I think Erica may have had a technical blip, and we'll be back in a minute. So while she's not here, I'll say that, one of the things that I tried to do in this book is really think about, what are the ethical principles that might helpfully guide us in thinking about our relationships with dogs. And what it came to for me was that they're really basically the same as those that guide our relationships with humans, which are two basic principles that are they're universal. They're to be found across time, across cultures, across religious traditions, and those are to avoid causing harm, and to be kind, to do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And I think those sound easy and simple, but if you actually really try to apply those to dogs, in your life with dogs, they're pretty challenging. And, for example, do no harm. It sounds like kind of a passive principle, just avoid letting bad things happen. But if you really dig down into it, it's a very active principle that requires a lot of work and attention on our part because, with dogs, my sense is that companion dogs who live in home environments are exposed to a lot of harm that we may not recognize as harm, and or just may not articulate as harm. And one example of that is the fact that they are held captive, and people get really uncomfortable when you say pet dogs are captive animals. They're like, no, 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 they're not. This is not like a zoo, or this is not like a hamster that is in a cage and can't get out. But the conditions of captivity are that you are confined physically in terms of how you can move, where you can move, at what times you can move, and whether or not you have access to the basic fundamentals of keeping yourself alive. So access to being able to find your own sources of food and water and social interaction and reproduction and whatever else. I just kept going while you were gone. I don't know if you could hear me, but
thank you. Yes, I was able to.
Yeah.
So we had some technical difficulties on our end, and it looks like our stream may not be streaming live to Facebook. So if you are having difficulty, don't worry, this will be recorded and you'll be able to watch the replay. But if you're trying to join from Facebook, hop over to YouTube. It is going on YouTube. And also we did have we've got some people who are saying, yes, you can hear us, which is great. Thank you guys for bearing with us because this is such an important conversation and I don't want to stop it. So thanks for giving us the background of everything with your career. And I was able to still listen. So,
okay, good.
I think that, yeah. And I think like you were talking about, I think that people do have this, it sounds terrible to say we have these dogs in captivity, but to an extent we do, and they are relying on us, and so how we approach that is really important, and I'm so glad that you're giving it a lot of thought. So again, that shows up a lot in this book, and you're asking the really tough questions, which is noble because I think a lot of people try to shy away from that. And you mentioned too, that there's a lot of controversy in the dog training world, and as dog trainers we see that all the time, and so it's great to see that you're approaching it and you're willing to have that conversation and you're willing to say, let's talk about this in a respectful way to make that conversation happen so that we can all grow as a community and as people who do care genuinely about dogs.
Right.
So I'm grateful for that input as well. Just to touch a little bit, we had a couple of comments that came in. My dogs are all misfits, but I would not trade them for anything. And I hate the mean and bad labels. I think that we get that a lot.
Yeah.
That idea of if your dog doesn't perform or behave in a certain way, that they're a bad dog. Yeah. And I think that can, again, be really discouraging for people. Can you talk a little bit more about your experience with Bella being labeled as a bad dog and how that kind of inspired where this book came from?
Yeah. And I have a whole section in the book on labels. And I struggle with them because I think in some ways labels are helpful and we need some labels. And labels can signal to people important things about what our dogs are like and what they need. But some labels I think are just maybe have so much baggage that you might say that they're less helpful than they are illuminating. one of the labels, I think the label mean is just, no, dogs aren't mean. Aggressive, I think, is also pretty loaded. It could be technically correct with some dogs. But I think many people who are interacting with dogs, especially people who you might meet on the street, don't understand what that means to a behaviorist, for example, or how nuanced it is. So I haven't tried to avoid that unless it's professionals talking to each other, in which case I think it's a different issue. The label reactive is one that I've struggled with. I've used it with Bella because people seem to understand when you say, my dog is reactive, that means you need to be careful around her. But I'm not sure about it. And, that's like many things in this book. I'm not sure what the right answer is. I just want to talk about it and have an open conversation about it. And, talk about whether that's a good label. One label that I like and that I talk about in the book is the dino. And I'm not going to think right at the moment of the woman who came up with this, but I think it's helpful. My dog is a dog who needs space.
Mm-hmm.
In other words, please don't come up in the park and pet my dog on the head if you don't know me or my dog and haven't gotten consent. So trying to signal to people that they need to behave in a certain way. And although this book is about dogs, it's really a book about human behavior. And so many times we talk about dog behavior problems. I think they're really human behavior problems. Like when I can't tell you how many emails I get from, even though I'm not a dog trainer and I'm not like equipped to give advice on this, but I have written about bark deterrence and my feelings about them, which aren't very positive. So I get a lot of emails from people saying, well, I saw your article and I live next to this dog who barks incessantly and it's terrible. And I get that. I sympathize with that. It's a problem. But I try to point out to them that it's not a dog behavior problem. That is a human behavior problem.
Yes.
Often the human behavior problem is intractable. The humans are not going to change. So, how to actually respond to the problem is complicated and usually involves a fallback on the dog, which is unfortunate. But I think the label's mean. I also think the label bad just has no place in our vocabulary, especially because I think for a lot of people who live with dogs who aren't dog trainers or dog professionals, bad has a lot of moral connotations that just don't really translate to dogs. Like if a dog eats your shoe, your dog does not feel that she has committed a moral sin. Nor does she probably feel that if she has, like Bella, when she can't now because she's got some physical disabilities, but counter surfing, she was very happy to engage in without any remorse. And that's not a bad behavior on her part. There's nothing morally wrong. It's a perfectly natural dog behavior. And it's my fault if I left something accessible. That was a human behavior problem. So just not labeling.
I love that example too. My dog is a counter surfer. My dog that looks a lot like Bella. Maybe it's a tri-colored eyebrow.
Maybe it is.
I know that other dogs and other breeds have it, but boy, is he crafty. And it's so interesting because it is a human behavior issue. If I, who arguably have a more well-developed brain and better discipline and impulse control, could just clear off the counter and remove any opportunity for reinforcement, we would not have this issue. We wouldn't even have this problem. He wouldn't
exactly.
Checking.
Yeah.
while, maybe the behavior would go through an extinction burst. But if I would stop leaving food where he could just get up and just get it, he would stop performing that behavior. But it's so hard for me to change my behavior
Right.
that the strategies that we've implemented are management. We put up a baby gate that, or a,
Yes.
an X pen, so he can't access the part of the house where we are eating food and cooking and leaving things
Yeah.
out. And does he have great training? Yes. Can I ask him to go station? Absolutely. But you know what? Sometimes for the human behavior half, it's just easier to say, stay over there on that side of the gate with your little enrichment toy so that I don't
Yeah.
have to modify my behavior, because that takes a lot of effort and a lot of work.
It does.
But I think that
Yeah.
knowledge, like you said, it's not his fault. He doesn't, and he certainly does not feel bad about it. He feels great about it. Let me tell
Yeah.
you.
Exactly.
know?
And yeah, and I think just what I like, if I could accomplish one thing in this book, it would be to just invite this slight shift in perspective that I still struggle with it, admittedly, but trying, when our dog engages in a behavior, to respond with curiosity and even admiration. Like,
yeah.
wow, Bella is really, she is being a dog. Whether it's, barking at the magpies outside, which, is she's doing her job as a dog, and understanding that that's something that she wants to do, needs to do. And if we don't like it, we need to use our brain to figure out ways to collaborate together, so that, and not to, I think often our inclination is just to squish the behavior. Say that behavior is not acceptable ever. It's bad. And I think that's not fair to dogs. When it's a behavior that they're, as a canine, really strongly motivated to perform, we need to use our brain to create opportunities for them to do that in ways that are safe, that don't irritate the neighbors, that don't drive us crazy. And we are so creative as the companions, the human companions of dogs, that we should be able to work these out. That's not to say it's easy. I think human dog collaborations involve a lot of conflict, and just acknowledging that that's okay. I mean, a marriage, there's conflict too, and you work it out, and you hopefully, you find a way to be harmonious, and just use the conflict as a way to be creative in living together better in the future.
I really like that. And you talk a lot in your book about collaboration, and how important that is to have there be, if not an equal say, then at least giving your dog the opportunity to have a say at all.
Yeah.
I love about in this book. It's funny because as you're talking, I'm like, oh, I want to ask this next. No, I want to ask this next. And come in, because I have a lot of questions. Because as you were just saying, you were talking about how, like, we have to give our dogs the opportunity to be dogs in a safe way. And one of the first quotes that I wrote down in here on your book on page 59, you say, I have never had a good dog if I had to judge canine character based on adherence to standard leash walking expectations. And we put our dogs on these leashes, and then we expect them to walk right next to us, but that's not being a dog. A dog would be following their nose. And you have this great passage where you discuss your local trails when they're freshly covered in snow, how you can see the humans walking in a straight line right along the path, and the dogs that are maybe allowed a longer leash or off leash in the areas where that's appropriate and safe, some freedom to explore, and they're kind of zigzagging around. And I think the challenge, but I love what you said, that the creativity that we have the ability to harness to be able to say, how can we let our dogs be dogs in a safe way? And that's such a great question.
Yeah. And it's hard, because a lot of manifestations of caring for our dog involve constraining them to keep them safe or healthy. I mean, taking our dogs to a vet is a pretty profound, for many dogs, a pretty profound form of constraint, usually, often physical constraint.
Yes.
And it's unpleasant and scary, and we do it because we love them. But just thinking, oftentimes the constraint is it's not that it's not necessary, but I think we can, I don't even necessarily like the word constrain because it has negative connotations, but we can collaborate with our dog to make something like a veterinary visit okay and voluntary to a certain extent. It takes a lot of work, and it doesn't work with every single dog, but it can. And with leashes, I love, one of my favorite things to see, and I feel like I'm seeing it more often, is a person out walking with their dog, and the dog is on a leash because it's required legally and it's safer for the dog, but the leash is loose. And it's not loose because the dog has been trained to heel at exactly 1.5 feet behind the right heel of the human. It's loose because the human is following the dog. The dog wants to sniff for 15 seconds. The human just stops. The dog wants to, like you said, and the dogs don't walk in a straight line very often in nature. And when they do, they're probably trotting. They don't, walking is not the preferred form of locomotion. And just letting them take the lead, because for many dogs, it's the only time they get to be out in the world. And, just this is why I love it when people read about canine cognition and canine sensory experience, because if you know how important olfaction is to dogs and that that's how they see the world, you understand why giving them a loose leash and letting them just linger over smells is so fulfilling for them. So I can't hear you.